Scott just made the point. Jeb Bush seems to be a lot more secure, not just in our selling late-term abortion baby tissue, the White House aggravating racial tensions across the country, a nuclear deal with Iran, which has ignited a regional arms race, 400,000 illegal aliens arriving every year, the Obama administration, a deadly shooting at a military recruiting office, Obamacare's Medicaid expansion busting state budgets, domestic spying, Moscow resurgent, Beijing running through the South China Sea unchecked. What's a front-running GOP presidential candidate going to do? Well, infight. And apparently not much else. I'm Steve Green. This is part 2 of a special 3-part trifecta where we look at all the stories frightening us these days and what might, in part 3, give us some hope. In part 1, we looked at the absolute insanity that's taken over the Democratic Party, and today it's the Republicans' turn. So let's bring on Scott Ott and Stephen Cruiser filling in for Bill Whittle this week. We'll get right to it. Gents, it's a crowded field of GOP contenders for 2016, but right now only 2 candidates seem to really matter because one is raking in all the money and the other is stealing all the attention. And if you're thinking I mean Jeb Bush and Donald Trump, well, feel free to cry into your PJTV coffee mugs. The first fight this week was between Jeb Bush and Scott Walker over President Obama's nuclear deal with Iran. The Weekly Standard reported, in his announcement speech at the beginning of the week, Walker had promised to terminate the Iran deal on day 1 of his presidency, and Bush, at a town hall 4 days later, said ending the deal on the first day of a new administration was unrealistic and suggested the promises to do so, while politically appealing, reflected a lack of seriousness. Scott, Bush is still the likely Republican nominee, and here he is offering a take-it-slow approach to abandoning Obama's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad deal with Iran. But how much confidence does that give you about GOP efforts to undo any of the leftward ratchet effects of the last 8 years?
Actually, I don't want to attack Jeb Bush. I don't want to attack Scott Walker. I don't want to attack any Republican who's running right now for the nomination. The problem with this country isn't what the out-of-power Republican presidential candidates have done to it. The problem with this country is what Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and the Democrat cadre have done to our country. And I think that's what we need to focus on. If there's a fault in the RNC, the Republican National Committee, it's that they don't get on the phone when these candidates are doing this to each other and say, look, the person you have to beat is not Scott Walker or Jeb Bush. The person you have to beat is Hillary Clinton. And you need to start getting on that now, because we're going to evaluate you, all of you candidates. And by the way, I don't think there are too many candidates. 16 candidates out of 320 million people. I don't think that's a crowded field. But we're going to evaluate these candidates on their ability to take it to the Democratic nominee, not their ability to attack their own kind. And so what I'm excited about, and we talked a little bit about this on the break, is what Cruiser pointed out, is that Carly Fiorina seems to be the only one who understands this.
Yeah, she really does. And speaking of Cruiser, I can't believe we have to do this, but in order to find a voice of sanity and reason in the battle of the trolls between Donald Trump and John McCain, we have to go to the Washington Post's Dan Bowles. Here's what he reported on what other camps are saying about that spat. Few would offer their views for the record owing to their positions working for other candidates or a desire not to put themselves into direct conflict with Trump. One described Trump's attack on McCain as lethal. Another said he expects a complete cratering of Trump's support. Still another predicted that Trump would become a niche candidate and a sideshow to the main event. And yet, Cruiser, Trump's poll numbers have never been higher. So what is a good Republican opposition party when its top polling candidate gives most of his money to Democratic causes and to Democratic candidates?
It's no good at all, and it hasn't been for about 2 decades now. That's exactly the problem right there. With Trump, you're dealing with a man who's been in the private sector for a long time. So it's the way he's been supporting Democrats, their policies and their candidates, has been financially and on Fox News and openly like that. So you can actually pinpoint. You can stick your finger at Trump and you go, you did that, you did that, you did that. I would posit that some in the field at present are giving their support to Democrat candidates and positions via their offices or the offices they've held in the recent past. I mean, you said 16 candidates. I think it's 17 now because Kasich is in the race. Governor John Kasich from Ohio, who's a big fan of the Obama Medicaid expansion and even used most of the Democrat talking points to sell it to his constituents. And when you've got a Republican that's jumping on board, all the while the other side of his mouth he's saying he's against the ACA. No, you can't be against the ACA if you're championing the central component that's making it look good on paper on the rare occasions that it does. So you're one or the other. And what the Republican Party needs right now, more than it's ever needed in the past, is something clear. We need some delineation between the two. The time for comity, not comedy, comity is long past. There's been a shift in politics in America in the last several years, and it is very contentious right now, and you need some clear delineation. I don't want a candidate right now who's going to be able to go out and have a drink afterwards with the opposition party. I want a candidate who's going to make the opposition party go home so that they don't want to have a drink with him or her afterwards. That's what this country needs that right now. I don't think it needs it forever. It hasn't always been the case in the past. But for this election, this point in history, with what's happened, we need a candidate who's not going to be just a slower death version of Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, that slow death. And by the way, I don't think anyone's ever accused Cruiser of wanting too much comity. Folks, right now, the GOP race is led by a Democrat light with the world's worst comb-over and a Democrat light with a pretty decent comb-over. That's the state of the GOP race at a time when Hillary Clinton starts with a likely 241 electoral college votes to the GOP candidates probably 191 or so. And it only takes 270 to win. The Republicans can't afford to lose a single state, but instead of doing the serious work of serious campaigning on serious issues, everyone is obsessed with Jeb's money and the Donald Trump roving clown show. This is not a good race so far when we should be suffering for an embarrassment of riches. So be afraid. Be very afraid. But I would never, ever leave you like that for an entire week. So stick around for part 3. What gives us hope? But you know what? Hope is for PJTV members only, so don't forget to subscribe. For Stephen Cruiser and Scott Ott, I'm Steve Green.